The 4th of July. It's 2023. 2024. We're 2025. I'm going to be your host tonight, Dana Durnford. I hope you're doing well. Consider clicking around a little tiny bit. It costs very little and it might actually help. Australia, Aussie is desperately wants nuclear again. We see this over the years all the time, but the big push for the last couple of weeks was really extraordinary. And of course, Australia's got no hope of ever having nuclear power because they've been doing a massive installation for quite a few years of solar power on people's homes, and that's contributing to the grid, right? And there's an agenda there too, so they're talking about pumping out a significant amount of gigawatts at that technique, and that technique actually works because solar's so cheap. And so once that is completed, that whole agenda that they've been doing for several years, nuclear still won't be breaking any ground. It'll take them 10 years to break ground anyway. So say they did, the politicians, the opposition gets elected again, and they say, well, we're going to go ahead with the nuclear. It's just a big cluster, right? There's so many things that they need to do because they don't have nuclear. They don't have the manpower. They don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the rules and regulations. So this whole infrastructure is a massive entity. You're talking tens of billions of dollars just to set that up. Well, certainly a lot more than that. Russia, and we're going to cover some of those stories here tonight. It's going to be a short show tonight because it's July the 4th. A lot of my viewers are Americans too. And because it's been a tough weekend, Dana. It's just a brutal week. And now the weather is going to break. It's basically broke today. But tomorrow is still going to be reasonable. But after that, we're in a heat wave. And so we're going to be out doing a lot of research. The capelin that are showing up apparently are really skinny and very low female count. So Russia veto a UN resolution. So who runs the world is United Nations. We see that connotation constantly. And it's because Russia is part of this United Nations. They can veto putting space-based nuclear arms. So that tells us that United Nations is running the planet. And they're a corporation. They're like McDonald's. They're a corporation. And they're running every other facet of your life too. It vetoed a U.S.-Japanese-sponsored UN resolution opposing the deployment of nuclear weapons in space. And the nuclear proctologists, my organization, we are anti-nuclear weapons in space. That's one of our foundations. The anthropogenic man-made radiation is called anthropogenic man-made radiation because humans create it. It's not created by the sun. It doesn't come from the solar system. They're unique. And we shouldn't put that kind of stuff in a solar system so vast. We don't know what the effects long-term will be, right? Nick Daniels says his neighbor's kids are blowing stuff up right now, with, I guess, the celebration so-called. So I want to put a video because it's Thursday. That's the last day of the week for me. And then any of my regular viewers would have something to watch during the weekend if they get a chance, right? I strongly recommend that you watch these videos in the first 12 hours because they're putting software in the video after 12 hours is showing up. The videos are longer. China abstained and 13 member nations voted in favor of the resolution. Russia vetoed. So unless everybody agrees, then it's vetoed. But each country should have a referendum, not United Nations. and then the United Nations can do the tally if they want to. But every country should have a referendum whether they should have nuclear in space. Not a bunch of people sitting in a foreign country by an organization that has showed itself to be completely sadistic and demented. The United Nations really, honest to goodness, shouldn't exist. An organization like it, but not something like United Nations. They're completely out of control. They're the worst humans imaginable. And they've been lulled into that complacency. A lot of them are just useful idiots. They're compartmentalized and they don't know any better. But a lot of them are degenerates that know the difference. Nuclear is clear. And Australia always got the stupidest advertisements or stories, don't they? At a time when Australian families, individual businesses are being crushed under the weight of rising electricity costs, that was caused by an embargo against Russia, and you couldn't replace the commodities anywhere else. So that's self-inflicted inflation. That's not caused by natural entities. That's caused by politicians from United Nations putting embargoes against the country's commodities that they can't replace anywhere else. And so those politicians should be put in jail for 40 or 50 years for destroying their country, shouldn't they? Newcastle councillor calls for the city to drop its nuclear-free status. We got a poll tonight, by the way. Is Australia stupid to even consider nuclear power when renewables like geothermal actually exist? Why would you even look at nuclear of all things? The nightmare that goes with nuclear, I just cannot comprehend. Well, I can. It's just the industry putting people, lobbyists, in key positions so that the corporations can make all the extra money a country has. The system is so evil. We have to deal with it. To drop his nuclear-free status in the hopes of securing the East Coast nuclear submarine base. Of course, we know with nuclear submarine bases, they hemorrhage radiation and other toxic elements. And that every time there's a military installation in a country, there's a whole bunch of children go missing within 100 miles. And brothels of those children will show up within a couple of miles of the military bases. That is standard operation we see for all military bases worldwide. Did you hear what I said? That is normal. To go out and kidnap children because all the military, majority of the military are young kids, right? They can't vote, but they can take a gun and destroy an entire community. And they can't quit their job. So once you join the military, you're a slave, right? You can't quit it. In the same week, Newcastle Council reaffirmed its commitment to being a nuclear-free city. And Liberal Councillor Callum Pull has called for it to relinquish that status. So a single person says we should do it, and then the media runs out with the story and hopes that the ban will be overturned for the nuclear industry. It's so corrupted, it's just normal. Corruption is normal. Honesty is so rare, we don't see an example of it every day or every week or every month or even every year. We see an example of it every few years of a journalist that's actually honest. Just a single example. Everything else is pure corruption. The nuclear industry is 100% pure corruption in every direction, and we cover every direction. And Sky News Australia, of course, which is disgusting. It's unbelievable they would put something like that up there in reality, because they actually understand how stupid it is, which is incredible. Nuclear proposal makes no sense for stupid Australia. Because Australia must be stupid if this is happening. They must be pretty cocky to think that they can do it, so that's why they're doing it. And like last week, we covered the news cycle for several days where there was no nuclear news. It was all Australia. I've never seen anything like that in my life of any country that dominated the 24-hour news cycle. I've never seen that before. I never heard tell of something like that. So there was that was a real push. It's still going on, but it's not as intense. But the idea was to dominate the narratives for a while and then pull back a little bit, but keep the pressure forever, probably. Independent MP Kate Chaney says as soon as nuclear is looked at in detail, it makes no sense. It won't get much momentum once people look at the details. But people won't see the details, will they? The details are the casualties of reality. Tasmanian Liberals says nuclear power can be part of the mix. The one thing I notice about the Australian, they have an exceptional amount of the politicians, not all of them, but a huge amount of them are unbelievable degenerates, just pandering to any industry that is throwing an idea around. They'll come out and back it up no matter how evil and sadistic it actually is. And nuclear is the most evil and sadistic industry. It's just simply shouldn't exist on the entire planet. It's the worst industry imaginable. The emissions are perpetual. Once you take the fuel out of the reactor core and put it in the fuel pool, it's still splitting atoms, for goodness sakes. The same amount of atoms used for the power of a million homes is now released directly into the environment 24 hours a day. Every second, the amount released is catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. And almost all nuclear plants are surrounded by farms. That alone should frighten the fucking shit out of you. If it doesn't, there's something fucking wrong with you. Excuse the French Canadian there coming out of me tonight. My apologies. Not really. Stupid senator from Tasmania, Helen Shit for Brains, suggested Tasmania can become home to a nuclear power station under the coalition's energy policy demonstrates fear-mongering at the finest. Because people are pushing back against it, so that's fear-mongering, see? Nuclear power debate heats up in political party stoush, which is that's actually an insult, right? That word. The great nuclear debate had made its way to North Queensland, with representatives of both Labour and LN, the Labour National Party, weighing in on the potential future of a nuclear-powered state. Why is that even being debated? They have a law in place that bans nuclear power, legislatively. So unless that's removed, overturned, preferably, in reality, it should be done with a referendum, shouldn't it? Because if you do a referendum, there's zero possibility nuclear is going to Australia. And these egomaniacs, right, they were in power for 10 years. They didn't mention the word nuclear a single time. Now they're out of power. They think the only way to get back in is promote nuclear. And they're in overdrive. The whole country has to be now propagandized with bananas and potato chips. And they've been rolling out the same old apologists for the nuclear industry from all the major universities that we've covered how many times, endless times over the years. The same apologists are showing up everywhere. Has failed to respond to questions as to whether the coalition would seek to take Commonwealth ownership of the nation's uranium deposits under its nuclear plant, or leave the door open for mining giants to profit from, like, the mining companies are not making a lot of money. Like, no more than a typical corporation is going to make. It's not, right? The stock market, though, that's a different story, isn't it? It's a big scam, right? CSIRO chief executive says Peter Dutton's comments on energy reports corrode the public's trust in science. And you'll never see a picture on my site, on a story or on a video, with me with a big stupid fucking grin on my face. Because that's probably the only time both of them have ever smiled in their lives. And the typical person video, when you see these pictures, you won't see them do that in the entire, if it's a 2-hour video, you won't see them do it a single time. The report found renewables would be cheaper than nuclear when it comes to powering Australia. And that's true, right? And I agree with them wholeheartedly. But I just hate these pictures. Like they put themselves on it instead of the topic. They're promoting themselves, right? Despite the fact that they're on the right side this time, I don't understand that mentality, how you can put your face on the picture of your video or your show, and that's the draw. Because when I see that picture, I'm not interested in watching it. I'm not. If they put trust to science, trust to science, we've seen where that got us over the years. The report found renewables will be cheaper, though, than nuclear when it comes to powering Australia. And powering Australia with nuclear energy would cost about twice as much as renewables. No, it's 10 times or more. And the amount that they're going to spend just on the submarines, 6 lousy friggin' submarines, is enough to power Australia twice with geothermal. And so don't forget what they're doing there, right? They're sucking an absurd amount of money for the nuclear. Because 7 out of the 10 top weapons producers are now set up in Australia since the American military base set up there, right? Which was like 15 years ago or something. Now 7 of the top 10 weapons producers, the misery machine itself, have major foothold in Australia. And they can't survive without just truckloads of money every single year. And that's what's happening. We're seeing Australia being just raped, literally and figuratively, by these industries of their wealth and their precious metals and their resources and their children, right? I don't understand why they do that. See, this is a more appropriate picture, isn't it? It's not twice as much, it's 10 times as much. Like, and it's not going to show up for decades and decades. Even if they go to work at it right now, it's not going to show up like anywhere else for decades and decades. Because the nuclear industry is aware that renewables, and let me explain that to you because that's kind of important. What were the statistics for 2023 of nuclear and renewables? What worldwide, what was that statistic? Well, I happen to have it right here for 2024, January the 1st. As of January the 22nd, I think it was. January 21st. That was close for a change. Nuclear goes backwards again worldwide as wind and solar enjoys another year, but it should be geothermal. Why is wind and solar, like geothermal is perfect, isn't it? Nuclear power suffered a net loss of 1.7 gigawatt capacity last year, 2023, which is 2 large nuclear power plants, basically. Whereas renewable capacity additions amounted to a record 507 gigawatts, which is equal to 575 large nuclear reactors coming online in 12 months. If they built 575 large nuclear reactors right now worldwide, if they started them all today, this wouldn't come to fruition for about 25 to 30 or longer years. They don't have the manpower to do something like that anyway. They don't have the supply chain to do something like that on top of that. And they certainly don't have the precious metal resources to divert directly to something like that. They need the military-industrial complex and stupid idiot NASA gobbles up, and the nuclear industry gobbles up all the precious metals and makes it so you can never be enjoyed by anything sensible. And that's 50% higher than 2022. So next year is going to be double. Next year it'll be double to triple. And the year after that, like from 2020 to 2026, the estimated 4,800 gigawatts of renewables would come online. That's enough to power the planet in just 6 years. So nuclear needs to get its foot in the door before the world wakes up and says, wait a second, we don't need nuclear. So they're just going after countries that are vulnerable or corrupt, right? You say nuclear power discussion is lighting up the inbox. The Daily Advertiser. The Daily Advertiser. So they're like, that's as blatant money machine as it gets. The chat won't even be had. The penny dropped for me recently when the rabid resistance of Labour and our fat cat business elites to an open discussion of future nuclear energy for Australia. Yeah, why would you look at nuclear in Australia, who has probably one of the best potential for renewables on the entire planet? Right? They don't have that huge population to worry about. They have the landmass. The British destroyed a lot of their land with radioactive fallout. The British traveled all the way down there to radiate the Australian cities and farmlands. That's what they done. We've covered it. They waited for the winds to blow across the Australian cities before they set off their nuclear weapons. They set off over 700 dirty bombs with conventional explosives and military-grade isotopes. 700 dirty bombs that still contaminated vast areas. Maralinga, the islands, the archipelago islands off Australia, 70 years later, are still not safe to be to because of radioactive fallout. The whole ecosystem, one of the most pristine paradises on the entire planet, they destroyed it. Like they done at Christmas Island, like they done at the Marshallese, at the Marshall Islands. And there was a concerted effort by like all countries to destroy tropical paradises. And I can never comprehend that kind of evil personally, because all of these tropical paradises were the nurseries of the oceans. Oh, I'm finally feeling a bit better tonight, thank goodness. I pushed myself so hard for so long, it's caught up to me. And I got no choice. We don't have anybody else doing educational programs. And we need to keep the pressure on the industry. And turns out, just a single educational program against the nuclear industry has wrecked the entire nuclear industry. I'm not blowing my own horn here or nothing, but that's a freaking fact. Nuclear waste site uncertainty. They got 80 years to get it right. They still haven't even tried. This is they're talking about the nuclear-powered submarines. What are they going to do with the waste from that? They don't even have the submarines. This is Australia. The opposition last week announced its plan to build 7 nuclear power plants at the sites of current and former coal-fired plants by 2050. That's such a great statement because that's what Quad C Electric is going to do with geothermal. Was going to convert all gas, oil, and coal and nuclear plants into geothermal. And the nuclear industry like, we could do it too. And Bill Gates, TerraPower, and Australia, and quite a few other major nuclear industries, that's what they're screaming constantly. We could do it too. Anything nuclear can do, small modular reactors can do. Geothermal can do it way, way sooner, way cheaper, and way better for way longer with no adverse side effects whatsoever. You're not going to pollute the ecosystem for millions and billions of years. Nuclear is not supposed to exist. It's a bioweapon against all the species. It's an ecocide weapon. It destroys the very foundation of all the ecosystems and everything else in between. It's 100% your enemy, and the enemy of every bacteria and fungus and flora and fauna, and it destroys the food chain. And that's very evident now. That's undeniable right now, that it has already done that. And so to keep going down that path, that's called evil. That's simply evil. To not try to choke this industry every day is evil. Former Kazakhstan Prom, I can't even pronounce that, thank goodness, official was arrested for abuse of power. And so this is a very impoverished area where a lot of the uranium worldwide is coming from, and where the Soviet Union done a lot of nuclear testing, and where there's an absurd amount of disfigured adults that have survived but are disfigured from congenital malformations, and the congenital malformations still showing up in severe forms in neonates and infants. This industry is your worst nightmare. Why is the world sitting in silence? Goodhue County passes nuclear emergency simulation despite flooding. That's the fucking stupidest story imaginable. It's the fucking stupidest story I've ever seen. I don't even know if I can read it because it's so fucking stupid. Goodhue County passes nuclear emergency simulation despite flooding. So they couldn't complete the nuclear emergency simulation because of flooding. But they passed it anyway. That's a fail, right? The idea of the nuclear simulation was to be able to evacuate people and deal with a nuclear emergency. They couldn't do it because of flooding. But they passed it. It's like driving down the road, and you're trying to do your driver's license, and you got your driver instructor, and your driver instructor is putting his hands over his eyes because he's so scared, and he tells you to take a left and take a right and park on the side of the road, and you hit the gas throttle, get over in the other lane, and you aim for a transport truck, and then you say fuck you to the driving instructor. You ram into it, and he's in a coma for 6 months. When he comes out of the coma, he goes, pass, so you get your driver's license. That's the equivalent of passing a nuclear emergency simulation despite the flooding. How the fuck did we ever get this stupid? How did that even happen? The Energy Management Agency, FEMA. Well, there you go. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? FEMA. Let me try this again. I'm just, how is this even possible? To announce how Goodhue County did a nuclear emergency simulation, the county and its neighbors passed with flying colors. With flying colors. They had floodings. They couldn't complete it. We're confident they can protect the public health and safety. No one can be confident to protect the public's health and safety if there's a nuclear accident. How the fuck is that going to work? You have a nuclear meltdown, you're confident you can protect the health and safety. Like, they're stupid, and then there's nuclear, and the pro-nuclear, and they're bootlickers, lapdogs. Okay, so here's a nuclear accident in Fukushima. Here's the radioactive fallout. So how the fuck do you protect the public's health when the radiation covers the entire planet in 15 days? How does that work? I need to know. You can call in at 709-589-4406 here in Canada and explain to me how that fucking works. How are you going to protect the public's health with flying colors that they can avoid a nuclear meltdown? They're confident to protect the public health and safety in a nuclear emergency. It simply can't be done in a nuclear emergency. The radiation doesn't give a fuck about the politicians. Said there were some tests that had to be delayed due to flooding. But they passed with flying colors. Like, you couldn't do the test because you had flooding. So that's a fail, stupid. It was flooding. You can't pass. It's flooding. The fact that emergency personnel were able to respond at all in the simulation while managing a real crisis was amazing. No, what's amazing is that anybody quoted you. What's amazing is that anybody thinks you're human. What's amazing is there's no laws against being that stupid. There really should be a law against this kind of stupidness. And the country will have until August 25th to take the test it missed because of flooding. So it couldn't complete the test, so therefore it can't protect the public. So if they had a nuclear emergency during the flooding, they couldn't protect the public. But it passed with flying fucking colors. This is why we're in so much trouble today, is because something like that is allowed to happen. I can't comprehend this kind of madness. It's so corrupted, it's completely dysfunctional. Nukes out of Scotland. Oh, we're killing it tonight, are we? What have we got here tonight? 15 people. Wow, I got 11 likes already. That's a fucking miracle. Is Australia stupid to even consider nuclear power and renewables like geothermal exist? I got 16 votes, but I only got 11 likes. Oh, to be an apologist. Before voting, we'll be well advised to look at the various political parties' stances with regards to nuclear weapons in Scotland. Well, one thing we know about nuclear subs is those things hemorrhage radiation. One policy is to remove nuclear weapons from Scottish territory in the event of independence, because the weapons are owned by the British. The British put the nuclear weapons in Scotland, so Russia will attack Scotland before they attack United Kingdom. United Kingdom went down to Australia to set off their nuclear weapons because they didn't want to radiate their own farmlands. Fuck Australia. Let's go down there and set off our nuclear weapons. You got any idea, like, how the hell did we ever get this complacent that could happen? Nuclear corrupts everything within a million miles of it. However, the party also indicated support for an independent Scotland joining NATO, which means they got to be nuclear. So why would Scotland join NATO? And NATO shouldn't exist. NATO is literally one of the worst things can happen to anybody. It has happened to anybody. They were created in response to the former Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed, along with people's pensions, of course, idiots, and the patents of the country, idiots, NATO should have been just dissolved. Instead, NATO's like, we got a lot of power. We got nuclear, we got jets, we got aircraft carriers. We're staying around. We'll find something else evil to pick on. We'll create evil if we got to. We'll stage a false flag and you'll scream for NATO tomorrow morning when you wakes up. You fucking stupid idiots. Environmental group says they will rally the troops again if Michael O'Leary plans for nuclear station in Wexford goes ahead. There's Australia. There's O'Leary right there. So he makes a big paycheck, so now apparently he's a god, and he demands, well, like nuclear wants to come, we'll support it. My job is to be stupid, not smart. That's why he got the job, because he's willing to be stupid instead of smart. Suggestions that a nuclear power plant could be built in South Wexford have left locals declaring they would rally the troops again to prevent such a development. In an interview with the Irish... this is Irish, is it? Michael O'Leary said Wexford would be the ideal site for a nuclear power plant, and he even offered to sell the land he bought in the country last year for that purpose. Like, the word scumbag can never be overused when it comes to nuclear. This used to be called a nuclear scumbag show, right? Now we call it the comedy show, the nuclear comedy daily news show. Radioactive comedy nuclear day. Call it what you want. It's a big comedy, right? Is it? It is funny that there's so many people in positions of authority that are insane and will cut everybody's throat so that they can live happily ever after. That's what it's all about. I'll cut a fucking 50 million people's throat. I get to live happily ever after. I'll do it. What's the difference between one person and another person? Is somebody will take a job and cut millions of people's throats so they can get a good fucking paycheck. And all the heat falls on their back instead of the industry that done it, right? Oh. Yeah, well, we live in a world of insanity. Insanity doesn't take a fucking break, does it? India successfully test-fired Agni 5. Agni, that's the right word for it, isn't it? Agni 5 nuclear capacity ballistic missile. The night trials came a few days after Chinese soldiers indulged in a brawl with the Indian soldiers. Those little fucking chinks can kick the shit out of people, you know. So, like, how's nuclear weapons going to help? The missile has capabilities of hitting targets beyond a range of 5,000 kilometers. And why all this posturing anyway? You're not going to use it. But this narrative, it's great for fear-mongering, right? It's great for getting people to support the nuclear industry. The night trials came a few days after Chinese soldiers indulged in a brawl with Indian soldiers at the line of actual control, and several soldiers from both sides were injured. I always feel just a lot stupider whenever I read the nuclear news for some reason. Analysts of particles containing alpha emitters in stagnant water in Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Station's Unit 3 reactor building. Oh, this is great stuff. You're going to like this. Sometimes I'm ashamed of this planet. And these are one of the stories. Look at all the people in that study. Now, they're all claiming that nothing got out of Fukushima. Nothing got out. Here we go. So, Reactor 3. So, let's see Reactor 3 first off. This is such a strange story. And again, this is not going to be a long show tonight. But, I mean, 12 likes at this stage of the show is just unacceptable. It's just unconscionable. My last show every week, I get no views, I get no likes. It's like it's all done by software too, right? Just to denigrate it. So that's the original footage of Reactor 3. And the reactor core and the fuel pools at the very top of the building. Now, the top of the building you can clearly see doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So stagnant water, like think of that word now, like any water in this building is lethal. It's not stagnant water, it's lethal. A liter of it walking past it will kill you. It's lethal. And so they produced this really exorbitant study to manipulate you into thinking that reactor 3 still had the reactor and the fuel pool. Oh, they've already claimed they got all the fuel out of the pool, right? This study came out a few days ago. June 28, 2024. Particles containing alpha nuclides were identified from sediment in stagnant water in Unit 3 reactor building at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station. We analyzed different concentrations of alpha nuclide samples collected at 2 sampling sites. The tourist room, and this is a tourist right here, and the main steam isolation valve room, which is these areas. You can't collect anything there. The building doesn't exist. And not only that, this was a mixed plutonium mixed oxide fuel facility. And it had decades of reactor cores. There's 2 fuel pools at the top of the building with around 8 reactor cores. And it blew up. It ejected the reactor core and the fuel pools out of the buildings, and they fell back down on that site and burnt up. Like, these are lethal doses. Academics don't go to Fukushima. It's the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants that don't speak the language. It's not nuclear academics. It's not nuclear companies. It's not nuclear corporations. It's not nuclear universities. And every nuclear student should have to work there for their first year, and then they'll quit the school right away rather than go to Fukushima. Well, I got to change my major if I got to go to that place. Other short-lived alpha nuclides like plutonium, americium, curium. Wait, what? Nuclear fuels in a reactor core were damaged. So they weren't damaged, they were ejected right out of the building. And just because you have an academic study published, one thing we know for certain, you can barely keep up with that kind of evil, can you? That's reactor 3 to your left. That was a 190-foot building. There's actually nothing left. The building actually ejected the reactor core. It ejected it out of the building. I'm going to show you the video in a moment. But being evil shouldn't be a requirement to get a job. But being evil is a requirement in the nuclear industry to get the job. You got to be evil. You can't work for the nuclear industry. This is reactor 3. And that's reactor 1. You're going to see great big chunks. See that? Falling back down over here. See these chunks? That's the fuel pools in the reactor cores falling back down. And they're claiming they're in the building, in stagnant water of all things. And there's not an academic on the entire planet that looked at this video, because this showed up within the first week, and said that the fuel pools in the reactor cores were in the buildings. Not one. They wouldn't say it public, but there wouldn't have been a nuclear expert on the entire planet. 2 years later, when they looked at this picture, that's reactor 3 and reactor 4, there's not a single academic on the entire fucking planet would have said that there's fuel in the pools or fuel in the reactor cores, because they don't exist. The buildings are completely gone. Just these stumps that should have been razed to the ground. They didn't razz them to the ground. They put these contraptions over it and then claimed that they were in the fuel pools and taking fuel out of the fuel pools. The sadistic fucking demons. Like journalists come out and just destroyed your ability to be rational. This is a bunch of journalists, if that's what you want to call them. These are monsters, let's face it. Pretending they're in the fuel pool of reactor 3, which is right alongside of reactor 4, right alongside of reactor 3, which is to your left. Despite the fact that clearly reactor 3, which is in your right-hand side, this was an incredible detonation. A 190-foot building was turned into dust, and the reactor cores and the fuel pools were ejected right out of the buildings. We've never heard tell of something like that. It's hard to appreciate how big the buildings are. So the buildings are 150 feet by 150 feet wide and square, and they're 190 feet tall. So that's one. This was a cover. This is the framing for a Kevlar cover of reactor 1 as a Kevlar, just to stop people from getting photographs. They disassembled it 5 years later, which is one of the strangest stories imaginable. So that's the top 3 parts, and that's the bottom part. So that piece right there is this piece right here. The fuel pools and reactor cores are at the top of the buildings. There is no top. Like when you look at reactor 3 and reactor 4 exact models. And so number one, because it looks like the building is intact, right? But it's not. It burnt constantly. So did reactor 2. For days. It burnt constantly for days. And so now there's clearly nothing left. That's the first couple of years that was well established. Okay, let's go back to the crazy story that we were just covering. Significant amounts of radionuclides, noble gases, and volatile radionuclides were released into the environment. And so that's one of the models over there based on 26 days after the tsunami. The plume covered the entire planet. I have an endless amount of those, so to speak, from different government agencies of the radioactive fallout. They also picked up 30 million one-ton bags. So to suggest there was a significant amount instead of an awful amount, instead of a catastrophic amount. Fresh and seawater. Well, seawater was injected for the first 40 or 50 days, and that created a phenomenon of the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs, because the sulfur was liberated. Let me see, I got something here, I think. Yeah, so there's this, to your left is a study of 360 atoms of radioactive sulfur, hydrogen peroxide buckyballs per day may have been inhaled by the Californians after Fukushima. Well, look, clearly the plume covers the entire planet. It wasn't just California. And it tends to concentrate in the testicles. So like for insects and birds and animals and mammals and stuff like that, smaller species, it's going to sterilize them in a few generations, if not right away. And this is what we've seen happen. And for everybody else, this is what it's going to do. Was injected to remove the decay heat of the nuclear fuel. The water was contaminated with components of nuclear fuel. Well, first off, you ejected the reactor core and the fuel pools right out of the buildings. So they produced a study, a fake study. This is a fake study. Scientific reports. But it's a fake study. And then this is the norm. This is, when you go look at this stuff, this is all you're going to find. This was the 28th of June. currently a circulating cooling system being constructed to cool the nuclear core. So this came out to 28. So 5 days ago, 6 days ago. So they're saying they're cooling the reactor core. There's a circulating cooling system being constructed at a nuclear meltdown, which is absurd to suggest. First off, that the reactor even exists, but that someone is there constructing it at a nuclear meltdown. And so academics that produce studies like this clearly should get the death penalty, because that's what they're giving you by lying to you like this. They're giving you and the 8 million species the death penalty. And anybody, and I don't give a fuck who they are, that is an academic and says that they're constructing cooling for a reactor core that doesn't exist should get life in jail, or actually should be getting the death penalty. They don't have a right to be on this planet. These are serial killers. And they're committing a crime known as ecocide by doing this, because you can't stop something you're not aware of. To cool the reactor core. And this is, by the way, this is the same amount of people I got on last Thursday's show is 12 or 13. The same amount of likes I had on last Thursday's show, 12, 13, 14. These are numbers I've never seen before. I know I've only been doing the show for over a decade. I know that's not very long. 5 days a week for a decade is not very long, obviously. It's horrific censorship. It's catastrophic censorship. How can you have a future? How can you have a conversation with that kind of censorship? And why are they censoring me that much? Because I lie? Is Australia stupid to even consider nuclear power when renewables like geothermal exist? Like, I'm getting more likes than that. It's just not showing up. It's not registering. I don't understand how people can take a job to censor someone who's trying to give them a future. How does that even work? Really though, how does that work? Because they know the job exists. They go to school to get that job. So they can censor people. They go to university, spend years and years to get PhDs and create incredible degrees, multiple degrees, to get a job that they know exists to come out and lie to you. And they make big bags of money doing it. I mean, they're making bags of money to come out and stab you in the back. And, like I know today is it's July the 4th. It's a big holiday in America, big celebration. So I get that. I put out a video so people can find it later. But that kind of censorship, like a lot of people will still come by and give you a thumbs up, basically, right? You still should have 15 thumbs up at least. That's the joke again, right? And how many people's videos get longer when 12 hours later? I don't know another site where the videos get longer after 12 hours. And I don't have the statistics for tonight's video, but I got them there for last night's video, I do believe. Or the night before. That video, after I didn't check it for 7 minutes, had 8 views. 8 views during a live stream now. I had 82 people come to the show. I had let me see here, what happened? So at 14 hours, the video is 1 hour 46:30 seconds. And at 7 minutes is 1 hour 46 and 21 seconds. So it gained 9 seconds after 12 hours. All of my videos are going to do that. So it's important that people watch the show in the first 12 hours because we don't know what they're doing to the video. Yeah, being evil just comes so natural to the industry. There is no other option. They can't survive unless they're evil. That's the reality of this industry. You can't get a job anyway in the nuclear industry unless you're a confirmed degenerate psychopath. That's the reality of it, isn't it? Alrighty, so that's all I got tonight. I just want to put out a short bloop bloop. Because Australia is pushing nuclear, which is patently absurd to push nuclear. You know, I'm not going to play the video because the show's over, but that's just a fraction of the people pretending they're in the fuel pool at the very top of a building that don't even exist. You got ABC Australia, for goodness sakes, pretending they're in a fuel pool of a building that doesn't exist. You got CNN, which ran a debate with 2 Jewish moderators. Nobody else allowed to ask questions. The strangest thing I've ever heard tell of. You had BBC Rupert Winfield Hayes in the top right-hand corner, who also pretended he was in Reactor 3. And you had CBS Seth Dorn, which is a senator's son, pretending he's in Reactor 4 fuel pool. That's just a fraction. And I created that little video 10 years ago. And I said, I got him now, man. This will wake the world up. And I've been playing that almost every day for 10 years. And nobody else has ever published that picture, that video. I think somebody did. Just once or something. But they sure got no problem publishing all the other videos they call fake news over and over and over, hundreds of times on different sites, Facebook and Twitter and BitChute and everywhere else. But how come that one didn't get any traction? You'll find many videos just like that in my playlist, in my short section, rather. Go to my short videos. There's 100 videos there. Lots of them only got 5 or 6 views. Not one of them got close to 1,000 views. I think the best I got a little over 300 views. And that was because I used it at the beginning of each of my shows for a long time. The censorship is just stunning, isn't it? Being a good person is an actual crime, right? Trying to do something good is a crime. That's a crime here. Only evil is allowed to succeed, right? Being a good person is... I apologize, my website is still down. I can't afford to renew it. I just can't afford it. I got too many expenses. And you're talking $400, I can't... I had big bills this month again. I can't keep up with the expenses. We don't get the support. We just barely keeping the show alive. Nuclear industry, though, if they fart, you get an extra $1 million. I work like a fucking dog, and I want to get out and do research, and I can't go out and do research and reactivate my website. And my website is 11 years old. It's 11 years old. It's full of documentation. And now it's offline because I can't pay the fucking bill. Because we only have 1 or 2 donors. And I can't keep up with the expenses. And every month I burn whatever is left of my pension. I'm just trying to keep this whole operation alive to fight for this planet. And then I get censored on my show so much I only got 14 likes. 14 likes. 14 likes. It's unbelievable. And that's what the industry is good at, right? Evil comes natural. Being a good person is fucking hard to do, trust me. Have a great night. Have a great day tomorrow. See everybody on Sunday, Lester's Breaking News. Take care, folks. Hugs for you and your loved ones. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. I know I won't.